Hey guys, tonight we begin a sleepy little journey through ancient Greece, not the romantic, marble-columned postcard version, but the sweaty, unpredictable chaos that is Hercules' 12 impossible labors. Picture this: olive oil clings to your skin, a lion the size of a small boulder is stalking you through a sun-scorched gorge, and you're holding nothing but a wooden club and a questionable plan. And somehow, this is just the first task. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'd love to know who else is attempting to fall asleep to Greek mythology tonight. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand at the mouth of a cave. The sun behind you is merciless, turning every exposed stone into a sizzling skillet. The cave breathes out a scent best described as lion funk mixed with aged olive oil. And there's a strange smear on the rock that might be blood or hummus. No way to tell. This is Nemea, a place so dry, your sweat evaporates before it even forms. The people here are terrified of one thing: a lion. But not just any lion. This one has skin that arrows bounce off, teeth that could punch through bronze, and the attitude of a cat that's missed 2 meals and a nap. You've been sent here as punishment. Well, technically, as penance. Historians still argue whether Hercules was fully aware of what he was getting into when he agreed to these labors, or whether his cousin Eurystheus just really hated him. Either way, you're here now, and that lion isn't going to skin itself. You tighten your grip on your club. No sword, no armor. Just muscle, desperation, and an understanding that this beast's hide is completely unpierceable. So, stabbing, useless; shooting, laughable; negotiation, not great with cats. You trudge deeper into the cave, feeling your feet stick slightly to the floor. Definitely not hummus. Suddenly, there it is, the lion. Its eyes glow gold, its mane thicker than any broom you've ever owned. It doesn't roar, it judges. You've interrupted its nap, and it's unimpressed. There's a moment where neither of you moves. Then it lunges. You swing, miss, duck, roll. That club you brought, snapped in half like stale baklava. You try wrestling, because why not? You're Hercules. And wrestling dangerous things seems to be your brand now. The lion thrashes, claws ripping through the cave walls like butter. You grip its throat. It claws your back. You headbutt it. It licks your face in confusion. Eventually, through pure force and enough adrenaline to power a chariot, you crush its windpipe. Slowly, quietly, almost gently, in a weird you tried kind of way. When it slumps down, the cave is silent again. You sit beside it, panting, bleeding, and wondering if it's weird to feel sad. It was, after all, kind of majestic, but also a murderer. So, mixed feelings. Now comes the real challenge. Removing the hide. You try using your knife. Nope. You try a sharp rock. Nada. You try fire. The lion laughs from beyond the grave. Eventually, you get an idea. Use its own claws. So you grip one of its paws like a hairy, oversized can opener and start slicing into the hide. It works. Slowly, messily, but it works. The pelt is heavy, warm, and absolutely reeks. You drape it over your shoulders, hoping it masks the smell of your own stress. Later, this lion cloak will become your signature look. But for now, you smell like death stew. You emerge from the cave just as a nearby shepherd faints at the sight of you. You don't blame him. You look like someone who won a fight against a god's mistake, and technically, you did. A historical note to keep your brain entertained. Some scholars believe this lion was the child of Typhon and Echidna, basically the monster power couple of Greek mythology. Others think it was a leftover pet from a god's drunken wedding. No one agrees, but the cave still exists. Sort of. Tourists visit the Nemean ruins, looking for signs of claws on the rock, and probably wondering why all the statues make Hercules look like he bench-pressed clouds. Oh, and here's your quirky tidbit of the evening. Ancient Greeks believed rubbing olive oil on your body before a fight could give you divine protection. That, or just make you impossible to grab. Either way, you're now both sweaty and slippery. Congratulations! You sling the lion's carcass over your back and begin the long walk to Tiryns, where Eurystheus, your jelly bean of a cousin, waits behind palace walls, hoping you got eaten. But you didn't. You're Hercules, and that was just task 1. You arrive back in Tiryns smelling like burnt fur and overripe feta. The guards at the palace gate eye your lion cloak and immediately step aside. No one wants to argue with a man who casually wears an apex predator as outerwear. Inside, your cousin Eurystheus does what he does best, squeal like a frightened lyre player and hide in a wine jar. That's not even a metaphor. He actually crawls into a massive ceramic amphora and tells you to leave the pelt outside the palace. You shrug. Fine. Let the servants deal with it. Before you can catch your breath or scrape the lion guts out from under your nails, he announces your next task, the Lernaean Hydra. You know, that creature with multiple heads, each one more bitey than the last. Oh, and when you chop one off, 2 more grow back. Because why not make things extra stupid? Lerna is a swamp, a big one. The kind that bubbles ominously and smells like the world's worst herbal footbath. You slosh through knee-deep muck, where every step threatens to pull off your sandal. Frogs croak warnings. A single crow watches you and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like idiot. You finally see it. The Hydra. It rises slowly from the murky pool like someone dramatically entering a stage show. 7 heads at first, no. Wait, 9. One of them sneezes. Another hisses. 2 are arguing about whose turn it is to eat you. Classic sibling chaos. You raise your new club, a thick olive branch stolen from a temple garden. Don't tell anyone. You charge. You swing. 1 head down. Success. Until 2 more sprout from the stump like angry tulips. And they're louder now. Great. You backpedal, tripping into a slimy puddle. A crab scuttles over and clamps onto your foot. You scream, not because of pain, because now you're fighting crustaceans too. Ancient texts casually mention this crab as a sidekick of the Hydra, sent by Hera, queen of pettiness. You kick it into the swamp, but the damage is done, your sandal is ruined, and your pride is limping. You realize brute strength isn't going to work, so you call for help. Enter Iolaus, your nephew, always late, always eating something. He shows up with a torch and a handful of figs. You stab. I burn, he says through a mouthful. The plan, every time you chop off a head, he cauterizes the stump with fire, stopping new ones from growing. And somehow, it works. Head after head falls, each neck singes under the torch's heat. The air smells like snake barbecue. You're sweating, swearing, slipping in Hydra slime. Finally, the last head immortal, of course won't die, so you pin it under a rock and call it a day. Hercules-style problem solving. If it can't die, at least make sure it can't move. Fringe fact of the night. The swamp of Lerna was actually a sacred site. Historians still argue whether the Hydra was meant to represent a real plague or natural disaster, symbolic of something the locals feared like disease or flooding, or maybe just very aggressive eels. Either way, you've reduced it to swamp sushi. You and Iolaus sit in the mud, panting. He offers you a fig, you decline. You don't eat anything that's seen Hydra juice. Back in Tiryns, Eurystheus is somehow more horrified than before. When he hears you needed help, he throws a hissy fit, saying the labor doesn't count. Typical, but in the end, Hera lets it slide, mostly because she's plotting 3 worse tasks already. You return to your quarters if you can call a stone bench and a bucket quarters. You wash off in a rain barrel. Hydra goo doesn't rinse easily. Your lion pelt, now slightly damp and definitely cursed smelling, becomes a makeshift towel. You stare at the stars that night, wondering what fresh nonsense awaits. You used to have a family, a home, a simpler life. But that's behind you now. You're something else, something heavier. The world has become a strange parade of teeth and horns, of fire and mud, and shouting gods who never seem to agree on anything. You've stopped asking why me. Now you just ask, how many heads does it have? By the way, odd historical footnote. In some vase paintings, the Hydra has exactly 9 heads. In others, it looks more like a tentacled hairbrush. Artists couldn't agree either. And in one fragment, the crab that bit you is given its own heroic name, Carcinus. Yes, the crab gets a name, you do the work. He gets immortalized. Welcome to mythology. you drift off against a wall, smelling faintly of smoke and pond weeds. Somewhere, another monster sharpens its claws. But that's tomorrow's problem. For now, you sleep. Dawn stretches across the hills like someone slowly unrolling a very old, very dusty map. You squint at the horizon, wondering if sleep counts when it's interrupted every hour by owl hoots and lingering hydra nightmares. Your back still aches from wrestling necks, and your sandal has officially decided to retire. No rest for the tragically heroic. Eurystheus, with his usual flair for being insufferable, announces your third labor: capture the Ceryneian hind, a deer, a glowing deer, with golden antlers and bronze hooves. Sounds easy, right? Wrong. This isn't just any forest critter. This hind belongs to Artemis. Yes, that Artemis, goddess of the hunt, known for turning people into deer if they so much as look at her wrong. So yeah, this one's delicate. You're told not to harm it, just catch it. Capture it gently, like a dream, or a very slippery bar of soap that also happens to sprint at 60 miles per hour. The hind lives in the wild forest of Cerynea, a shadowy place where the trees lean in just a little too close, and the wind always sounds like it's whispering jokes about your thighs. You step quietly, or at least, you try. Every twig snaps like Zeus cracking knuckles, and then you see her. The hind glows, literally, not metaphorically. Golden antlers shimmer like polished brass. Her hooves click delicately across moss and stone. She glances at you once with an expression that says, "You're not fast enough, but feel free to try," and then she bolts. What follows is a year-long chase. You thought this would be a weekend trip. Wrong again. You trail her across rivers, through mountain passes, and into valleys filled with sheep who side-eye you for being sweaty. The hind never stops. She doesn't slow down. Just when you think you've caught up, she vanishes behind a tree like a magician ghost. Fringe myth note. Some versions say the hind had wings. Others say she was just that fast. Historians still argue whether the golden glow was divine or just excellent lighting. And one poetic theory claims she represented time itself, always ahead. Never caught. Deep stuff. You try everything. Nets. She jumps them. Traps. She unties them. Ambushes. She whistles sarcastically and trots away. Once, you fall asleep in a tree hoping she'll pass beneath you. She leaves a hoofprint on your forehead. Rude. Months go by, your beard grows, your clothes tear. You learn the language of birds out of boredom and start naming squirrels. Your favorite is One-Eyed Greg. He steals your figs but offers moral support. Then, finally, on the far side of Mount Artemisius, near a moonlit stream, you see her pause, just for a moment. Her leg is caught in a narrow root. You move slow, breath shallow. Every step feels like balancing a cup of wine on your head. And you do it. You wrap your arms around her gently. She thrashes once, then goes still. Her heartbeat hums against your chest like a tiny drum. You whisper something, maybe an apology, maybe thanks. Now comes the awkward part. As you carry her back through the woods, Artemis appears. She is not smiling. She's tall, shadowy, glowing like moonlight through fog. She doesn't scream, doesn't shout, just stares, and you suddenly feel like the smallest, sweatiest man on earth. You explain, you stammer, you do that thing where you try to look heroic and humble at the same time. She listens, and in a moment that baffles scholars to this day, she lets you go. Maybe she sees your burden. Maybe she respects the year-long effort. Maybe she's just tired of men crying in her forest. Either way, she nods, and you walk away with the Hindensut. That night, as you rest with the creature curled beside you, you wonder if you're becoming something else. Less brute, more aware. You think about the chase, about the endless movement, about why you kept chasing, not for glory, maybe for peace, or maybe because you didn't know what else to do. One final strange tidbit before sleep. In some old altars, hinds were never sacrificed, only painted, revered, not harmed. As if even in ritual, people feared Artemis's deer might one day look back, and in your dreams, she does. You wake up with sore legs and pine needles in your mouth. The golden hind is long gone. Return to Artemis with a flick of her ear and a hoofprint left lovingly on your ankle. A farewell, a warning. Hard to say. You limp back to Tiryns, only to find Eurystheus holding a scroll with fresh panic in his eyes. Apparently, word has spread that you didn't butcher the sacred deer. Instead of praise, he He gets complaints. Too soft. They say, what's next? A picnic. So naturally, he doubles down with your next task. The Erymanthian boar. You sigh. Of course it's a boar. Not just any pig, but a tusked, frothing, blood-snorting beast that's been terrorizing the snowy slopes of Mount Erymanthos. It tramples vineyards, eats iron tools, snorts like thunder. You've heard rumors it once swallowed a donkey whole just because it sneezed too loud. The journey there is cold, like toes gone numb in 5 minutes. Cold as you trudge higher. Snowflakes bite your skin and wind whistles through gaps in your lion pelt. Somewhere along the way, you stop to rest at a cozy cottage belonging to your old drinking buddy Pholus, a centaur. Pholus is half man, half horse, fully awkward. He greets you warmly but eyes your club like it might ask questions. Still, he offers food, shelter, and a jug of wine. Not just any wine, sacred wine. Aged in amphoras blessed by Dionysus himself. It's meant for all centaurs to share. Eventually, you pop the cork anyway. Bad idea. The scent wafts through the forest like a divine alarm clock. Within minutes, other centaurs show up, angry, loud, and very drunk on arrival. Arrows fly. Hooves thunder. You wrestle 3 centaurs into a snowbank and accidentally set a tree on fire. It's not your best dinner party. Tragically, Pholus drops an arrow on his own foot and dies. You bury him with shaking hands, wondering if anything in your life cannot end in a brawl. Then you get back on task. The boar, up on the peaks. Everything is silent. Until it isn't. It starts with a rumble, then a snort. Then you see it. The Erymanthian boar crashes through the snow like a tusked avalanche. Eyes red, mouth foaming, hooves churning up frozen earth like it's chariot day at the Colosseum. You leap aside just in time. The next few hours are undignified. You run, it chases. You trip, it snorts. You climb a tree, it knocks the tree over. You throw a rock, it eats the rock. Then you remember something the shepherd said on your way up. Boars hate mud. They lose footing. So you trick it. You lure it into a narrow ravine where snowmelt has turned the earth to sludge. It slips, squeals, and before it can recover, you leap onto its back, wrestle its tusks, and bind its legs with the rope you stole from a centaur during last night's wine fight. You drag it all the way down the mountain, covered in bruises, half frozen, one sandal missing. The boar glares at you like it's composing a revenge epic in its head. When you reach Tyrans, Eurystheus takes one look at the beast and screams. He climbs into his storage jar again and yells from inside. Take it away. You oblige. You leave the boar tied to a fig tree and walk off like a man who just hosted a very violent Winter Olympics. Historical side note for your brain to chew on while drifting off. Wild boars were genuinely feared in ancient Greece. Their tusks could impale soldiers. Entire hunting teams were organized just to deal with them. Some myths say this boar was cursed by Artemis. Others think it was just a big, angry pig. Historians still argue whether it represented chaos, war, or just really bad bacon. And here's your fringe tidbit. Ancient boar hunters wore masks shaped like dog snouts to confuse the boar. Not a fashion trend that stuck around. You finally collapse beside a fire, arms trembling, back sore, your breath visible in the cold. You smell like ash, sweat, and a hint of boar breath, but you're alive. Which, at this point, feels like your superpower. You wake up to birds screaming, not chirping, screaming, like flutes made of razors being played by angry toddlers. The kind of sound that drills straight through your skull and makes your eyes water. Welcome to Lake Stymphalus. Your 5th labor is to get rid of the Stymphalian birds. These aren't your average feathered nuisances. They don't peck seeds. They don't coo. They don't even fly in nice little V formations. These birds are armor-plated nightmares with beaks sharp enough to slice bronze and feathers they fire like arrows. Oh, and they poop metal. That's not metaphorical. It's deeply unfortunate. You stand at the edge of the lake, ankle deep in mud, watching the trees sway under the weight of hundreds, maybe thousands of these winged war machines. The villagers say they used to offer the birds figs and barley to keep them away. Now they just run. You try throwing a rock. One bird catches it midair and throws it back. It hits your shoulder with a clang. Rude. You can't charge in, there are too many, and you can't sneak up on them. They've got better surveillance than a temple treasury. So, you turn to a gift from Athena, a pair of bronze crotuli, basically giant castanets, but louder, a lot louder. You creep into the shallows, raise the crotula high, and clack them together. The result is instant chaos. Birds shriek and take off in a fury, flapping hard enough to knock over small trees. Feathers fly, some piercing bark, some zipping past your ear with a hiss. You duck. You spin. You yell a heroic insult about someone's mother being a goose. They're confused, disoriented, and that's your window. You charge with your trusty sling, flinging stones with all the grace of a toddler in a food fight. You knock out one bird, then two. Another grazes your thigh with a metal feather. You now have a cut shaped exactly like ancient punctuation. Fun. The battle takes hours. You wade through reeds, mud, and at one point, what might be bird vomit. Eventually, the surviving flock gives up. They scatter across the horizon in a clattering blur of wings and curses. You stand alone, covered in scratches, feathers, and something sticky that smells like rusted olives. Historians still argue whether the Stymphalian birds were real creatures, symbolic monsters, or metaphors for border raids from the north. Some say they represent chaos brought by invaders. Others think they were a poetic way of saying, our lake is full of weird geese. One theory even suggests the birds were sacred to Ares because, of course, war gods would love razor-beaked pigeons. Fringe fact of the evening. Ancient Greeks believed birds could carry messages from the gods, but not these birds. These birds were more of the stab first, squawk later variety. In fact, one old text claims a single feather once sliced through an entire loaf of barley bread and the table beneath it. That loaf did not ascend to Olympus. You sit by the water, rubbing your arm where a bird wing slapped you like it meant it. The lake is quiet now, peaceful. Even, you think about how many creatures you've fought that weren't just strong but strange. Things that didn't obey normal rules. The lion that couldn't be cut. The hydra that doubled when hurt. Birds that shoot feathers like daggers. You wonder if maybe the world is a little stranger than everyone admits. Or maybe you just keep getting the weird jobs. A farmer approaches, barefoot and wide-eyed. He bows low and offers you a basket of stale bread as thanks. You accept it like treasure, because at this point, anything that isn't screaming or trying to impale you feels like divine hospitality. As you walk away from the lake, your lion pelt draped like a crusty shawl, you notice something new, a silence behind you. For the first time in days, you aren't being chased, bitten, or cursed. You smile. Briefly. It'll fade, these things always do. But for now, it's enough. You return to Tyrants expecting at least a bowl of lentils and maybe a foot rub. But instead, Eurystheus greets you with the enthusiasm of a goat about to be sacrificed. He has your next labor ready, and this one. It stinks, literally. Clean the Augean stables, he says, nose turned up like he's never done a chore in his pampered little life. You raise an eyebrow. Stables. Yes, he sniffs. Thousands of cattle, never cleaned, ever. You wait for the catch. And there it is. You have to clean them in one day. You've lifted lions, wrestled hydras, outrun golden deer. But this is biological warfare. The Augean stables belong to King Augeas, who is about as charming as mildew. He's rich, lazy, and has 1,000 immortal cattle lounging in filth that hasn't been touched in 30 years. 30 years. Historians still debate whether the number was symbolic. Some say it represents political corruption. Others think it was a jab at real kings who let things pile up both literally and metaphorically. Whatever the case, you're now face to face with a wall of manure so high it has its own weather system. You step inside and gag. The stench slaps you like a wet sandal. Flies swarm. The floor squelches. You stare at the endless rows of beasts calmly chewing cud atop literal mountains of dung, each one looking at you like, good luck, buddy. You try shoveling. No, the shovel snaps. You try buckets. You fill two, sink to your knees, and start questioning your life choices. And then, an idea, a big one. You leave the stables, climb a nearby hill, find the two rivers, Alpheus and Peneus, both winding, twisting, rushing past the kingdom like they have somewhere better to be. You dig a trench, then another, then a canal. Sweat drips, dirt flies, your hands blister, your arms ache. And halfway through, you step on a thorn and curse the gods under your breath. Except Hermes. He's probably laughing, but at least he'd laugh with flair. By midday, they trench curves into place. You hammer a few makeshift wedges into the rock and crack. The river bursts forth, surging down your channel with wild, muddy joy. It floods the stables. The cows moo in protest. The filth churns and lifts, swirling like some ancient yogurt gone very, very wrong. You climb to higher ground as thousands of gallons of holy river water wash away 3 decades of digestive backlog in a single, swirling miracle. It works. The stables are clean. Cleaner than your conscience. Cleaner than Eurystheus's hairless little soul. You grin, briefly, because that's when Augeas finds out. He's furious. Apparently, you weren't supposed to use strategy, just brute force. He accuses you of cheating, refuses to pay the reward he promised. You contemplate introducing him to your lion skin fists, but instead, you just walk away, mud-covered, drenched, but victorious. Fun fringe fact. Ancient Greeks actually believed in the cleansing power of rivers, not just physically, but spiritually. Whole temples were built beside them, so worshippers could rinse away their sins. You, on the other hand, used to flush out cow poop. Innovation. Also, worth noting, in one forgotten version of the myth, it's said the cattle themselves were divine, their breath able to purify the air. If so, they weren't trying very hard. Back in Tyrans, Eurystheus once again panics. He had hoped you'd drown, or at least faint. Instead, you show up soaked, stinking faintly of riverbed, and smug. He scribbles something on his scroll, probably find harder labor, and pretends he wasn't hiding behind a column when you walked in. You rest that night by a stream. Not one of the ones you hijacked, and think about what just happened. You didn't swing a club. You didn't wrestle a monster. You solved a problem. Like a mortal, like a man. It's odd and a little beautiful. You stare at the stars, the trickle of water beside you a soft lullaby, and wonder if there might be other ways to conquer the world besides smashing it. But knowing your luck, the next task will involve teeth or fire, probably both. So, about that next labor. You're still drawing river water out of your lion pelt when Eurystheus, now visibly more stressed than a goat at a sacrificial feast, summons you again. This time, he doesn't even bother with theatrics, just hands you a scroll, mumbles something about good luck with Crete, and waddles off into the shadows like a man who's just outsourced a war. Crete, that sun-blasted, wine-soaked island where myths go to throw wild parties and occasionally produce chaos monsters. You're told to retrieve the Cretan bull, a creature that's not just gigantic and angry, but also sacred, or cursed, or possibly both. Depending on who you ask and whether they've had their wine ration yet, the bull's history is murky. Some say it's the same one that carried Europa across the sea when Zeus transformed into it for one of his deeply inappropriate flirtations. Others think Poseidon sent it from the depths as part of a divine dare gone wrong. Historians still argue whether this bull was meant to represent Crete's economic power, religious identity, or just a warning about letting your livestock near temples. Either way, it's your problem now. You arrive in Knossos under a sun that could cook eggs on your forehead. The streets are quiet, too quiet. Turns out, the bull's been loose for weeks, charging through olive orchards, knocking over wine presses, and terrorizing beachgoers. He even allegedly flattened a statue of Minos himself. Twice, locals offer no help. One old man hands you a broken pitchfork and makes the sign of the evil eye. A child sells you a map that turns out to be a poorly drawn picture of a cow. You sigh. Again. You find the bull grazing in a field, its hide gleaming like polished bronze in the harsh light. Its horns curve like twin scimitars, and it snorts steam. You lock eyes. It pauses. Then, like any good creature of chaos, it charges. You sidestep barely. The ground shudders as it passes. Your knees buckle. You chase it through the vineyard, dodging grape-stained boulders and screaming villagers. At one point, it jumps over a shrine. You do not. You crash into it. Offer a quick apology to whatever god is listening. Eventually, you stop chasing and start thinking. You remember the river trick? Maybe it's not about strength. Maybe it's about rhythm. So you watch. You let the bull run its wild loops. Over hours, you begin to see its pattern, a curve through the trees, a circle around the boulders, a pause by the broken cart. Every time, just so, you wait near the cart. It charges. You stay still, just one step to the left. And then your arms wrap around its neck. Not in anger, not in panic, just sheer, focused presence. The bull bucks, twists, roars, and you cling. You slide onto its back, hold tight to its thick hide, fingers digging in like you're holding onto a thundercloud. Slowly, it stops, snorting, trembling. But still, you whisper to it nonsense words, mostly, but gentle, and for reasons lost to myth. The bull listens. You guide it back through the fields, past stunned farmers, past statues and vines and olives that seem to bow in the wind. You sail back to the mainland with the bull on a creaking raft. It munches hay and glares at you like a coworker who didn't ask to be part of this project. Fringe fact for your pillow tonight: bulls were sacred in Minoan culture, worshipped in art, tied to fertility, and believed to possess divine fury. In fact, some rituals involved vaulting over bulls as a test of agility and bravery, because who needs knees? Back at Tyrann's, Eurystheus sees you returning with a calm bull and immediately orders it locked away. Don't let it near the palace. He squeaks. Too late. The bull snorts, lifts its tail, and deposits a very ceremonial opinion right at the palace gate. You don't laugh out loud. That night, you sit beside the bull under the stars, both of you breathing slow. The sea hums nearby. The stars feel heavier, like they've been watching, judging, maybe cheering. You wonder if the gods ever imagined this path for you. Not glory or riches, just you, quiet, beside a creature that could flatten armies, and choosing not to fight it. The bull is gone, locked up, maybe worshipped, maybe feared. You're not really sure anymore. What you are sure of is this: Eurystheus is running out of monsters, and you're running out of patience. You walk into the palace like a man who's just survived too many stampedes and minor concussions, only to hear him blurt out your next task with zero eye contact: retrieve the mares of Diomedes. You blink. Like horses. Yes, flesh-eating ones. Of course, because normal horses just weren't terrifying enough. So off you go again, this time to Thrace, far to the north, where King Diomedes rules with the grace of a badly trained kitchen fire. His prized possessions: 4 man-eating mares, kept in iron stables and fed the occasional unfortunate visitor. He swears by their temperament, calls them his beautiful daughters. You're not going to unpack that. Historians still argue whether these mares were literal or symbolic, representing the brutal nature of war horses, or just Diomedes' hospitality strategy. Either way, they're real enough when one of them tries to bite your face off the moment you step near the paddock. The stables are a mess of chains, blood-stained troughs, and hay that nobody wants to touch. The horses themselves are large, too large. Their eyes roll in strange directions. Their hooves strike sparks against stone. One of them seems to laugh when you trip. You realize early on that brute force won't work. So, you try charm. You coo. You whistle. You wave a fig. One mare lunges and nearly tears off your lion pelt. You reconsider. Then an idea. What if you don't tame the horses? What if you feed them their owner? Morally questionable. Perhaps efficient. Extremely. You march into Diomedes' palace with the confidence of someone who's wrestled hydras and cleaned cow sludge with river engineering. He laughs at you, a lot, then orders his guards to kill you. You, of course, flip a table and start swinging. The fight is chaotic. You throw a stool, someone throws soup, a tapestry catches fire. Eventually, Diomedes is knocked cold by the business end of a bronze pitcher. You drag him snoring and drooling to the mares. They perk up immediately. You look away. When you turn back, the horses are calm, sated, grooming themselves. One even lets you pat its nose. And just like that, they follow you. You walk them across Thrace like a twisted parade. People hide in doorways. Children whisper stories. Someone throws you a loaf of bread. You catch it. Things are looking up. Fringe tidbit for tonight's brain nibble. There was an actual region in ancient Thrace known for breeding unusually aggressive war horses. Some records even mention blood-trained steeds, conditioned by the smell of battlefield carnage. Whether they ate people is debatable, but they certainly weren't cuddly. And here's your historical nugget. King Diomedes was, in some versions, a son of Ares, the god of war. So these mares weren't just beasts, they were a divine punishment on hooves. And you just solved it. Eurystheus doesn't want the horses. Obviously, the moment you arrive, he sees their teeth and flees behind a tapestry. He orders them released into the wild, preferably somewhere far from his palace and his dainty sleep schedule. So you let them go. You watch as the mares gallop into the hills, their manes flashing like fire, their hooves drumming against the earth like distant thunder. You sit by the road for a moment, just breathing. You smell like sweat, panic, and oddly enough, fresh hay. You think about how none of this is really about winning. Not anymore. You're not here to claim thrones or amass wealth. You're just moving forward. Because someone has to. You barely make it 3 steps into the palace before Eurystheus throws a sash at your face and screeches, "Bring me the girdle of Hippolyta." You blink, like a belt, a magic one, worn by the queen of the Amazons. Right, a belt. From an immortal warrior queen, protected by a society of elite horse archers who make most armies look like snack food. This should go well. You sail across the Aegean, the sea surprisingly calm, as if the gods are taking a nap, which is both suspicious and oddly comforting. You pass islands that smell of pine and roasted olives. One fishing boat throws you a fish in support. It slaps you in the face. You take it as a blessing. When you arrive at Themyscira, the land of the Amazons, you are greeted by absolute silence. No guards, no shouts, just rows of tents, gleaming spears, and an atmosphere that says, "Tread carefully." Hippolyta meets you before you can dismount. She is tall, graceful, wrapped in bronze and leather, with a calm expression that somehow carries the weight of 100 battles. She looks at you like she already knows the ending of the story and isn't particularly impressed. You explain your task. She listens. Then strangely, she nods. She agrees to give you the girdle. No tricks, no fighting, just like that. And for a moment, you feel grateful. You're not used to this. To mercy, to ease. But of course, peace never lasts. Enter Hera, invisible, furious, bored. She whispers through the camp, stirring rumors like a goat stirs soup clumsily and with a lot of splashing. She convinces the Amazons that you're here to kidnap their queen, that this is all a ruse, that men can't be trusted. The tension builds, spears glint, horses stamp. A drumbeat starts not ceremonial, but warlike. You try to calm the storm. You shout, you gesture to Hippolyta. She tries to speak, but it's too late. The Amazons attack. You fight, but it's not like the others. This isn't rage, it's sorrow. You don't want to hurt them. You dodge more than you strike. You lose your club. You use a shield instead. They come like waves, elegant and relentless. Eventually, Hippolyta is forced into the fight herself. Your eyes meet. There's no hatred there, just disappointment. Like 2 people trapped in a bad play they didn't write. You disarm her gently. The girdle falls to the ground. She steps back, doesn't speak, just watches as you pick it up. There's no victory in it, just silence. You leave the camp with bruises, not all physical. The ship rocks gently beneath your feet as you sail back, the girdle tied carefully around your arm. You don't feel like a hero, you feel like a thief with too many regrets. Fringe fact of the night: Amazons, while mythological, were likely inspired by real nomadic warrior women from the Eurasian steppes. Archaeologists have found female skeletons buried with weapons, armor, even riding gear. Whether they wore magic belts is unclear, but they definitely didn't need them. And historians, they still debate whether Hippolyta gave the girdle willingly, was tricked by Hercules, or died defending it. Versions vary wildly. Some say this labor was less about strength and more about diplomacy, something Hercules rarely got credit for. You arrive at Tiryns in the middle of the night. Eurystheus is asleep, probably dreaming of pillows shaped like gold coins. You place the girdle on his throne and walk out before he even wakes. You sleep under an olive tree that night, surrounded by the sound of crickets and the distant hush of the sea. You dream of arrows flying through the sky, not at you, but away, released, freed. You're up before the sun, watching it bleed gold across the hills while olive branches shiver in the wind. Your arms ache. Your lion pelt smells like seawater and regret. And your sandals are officially more whole than soul. You barely sit down to tighten them when Eurystheus comes running, scroll in hand. shouting something about cattle and a three-bodied man. You don't even flinch anymore. This time, you're heading west, far west, beyond the Aegean, beyond the mountains, beyond even what most Greeks would call relevant. Your task: steal the red cattle of Geryon, the triple-bodied giant who lives at the edge of the known world. Yes, triple-bodied, as in one head, two extra torsos, because apparently monsters were just modular now. To make things worse, his cattle are guarded by a two-headed dog named Orthrus, brother of Cerberus, because the underworld apparently ran a whole litter. And a herdsman who carries a spear the size of a tree. You don't ask questions anymore. You just walk. The journey is long. So long you pass into countries that don't even name their rivers. Just gestures and grunts. The sun grows hotter. The ground cracks. At one point, you build a makeshift shelter from your own shield just to avoid boiling alive. A scorpion tries to crawl in. You kick it out politely, at the edge of the world where the air tastes thin and the stars feel closer. You reach the island of Erytheia, and there they are, Geryon's cattle, glossy, red, divine, chewing lazily on golden grass like they haven't been raised by a warlord. You take one step forward and here comes Orthrus. Both heads bark at once, a sound like bronze being torn in half. You barely roll aside as one mouth snaps at your leg. The other tries to bite your club. You fight fast, brutal. One head goes silent. Then the other. The dog drops. No time to breathe. Now comes Eurytion, the herdsman, built like a walking statue, angry like someone whose lunch break just got interrupted. You disarm him with a quick jab and a shout. He runs. Smart man. And then Geryon. He steps over a boulder like it's a pillow, all three torsos gleaming with bronze armor, three swords at his sides. His voice echoes, all three mouths speaking at once, weirdly harmonious. Kinda catchy. You fight hard. He's faster than expected, and coordinated one arm swings while the other blocks, and the third throws a spear. You duck, slide, curse, jab. Your lion cloak catches a blade, sparks fly, sweat blinds you, but eventually, your club meets one of his ribs with a sound like thunder in a cave. He falls. All three bodies hit the dust like felled trees, and you're left standing, alone. Again, you round up the cattle. It takes days. They're feisty, spoiled. One of them keeps licking your elbow. Another steps on your foot and refuses to apologize. You herd them east, back through strange lands and stranger weather. In Libya, a sandstorm blinds you for hours. In Italy, pirates try to steal 2 cows. You don't even stop walking, you just throw a rock behind you and hear them run. Fringe fact for your night thoughts. Geryon may have been inspired by ancient Etruscan gods, often depicted with multiple heads or bodies to represent dominion over different realms. Historians still argue whether his triple form meant 3 literal torsos or a symbolic representation of power, territory, and perception. But most agree on this. He was a cosmic weirdo. And a curious side note, cattle were sacred in many ancient cultures. These weren't just livestock, they were walking symbols of wealth, fertility, divine favor. So stealing them, that wasn't just theft. It was an act of cosmic rebellion. You return to Tyrannus exhausted. You arrive in the dead of night, guiding your fragrant, divine cattle like some mythical cowboy with a limp and a haunted stare. Eurystheus refuses to meet you. He sends a servant with a note. Nice cows. Please remove them immediately. You do. You leave them grazing on a distant hill. You whisper to the one that licked your elbow. He nods, solemnly, like he understands. You sleep that night by the roadside, the stars above you bright and silent. You dream of red hooves and echoing voices, and the next journey calling you, just over the hills. You wake with hay in your hair, and the lingering scent of divine cow breath still stuck to your clothes. The road ahead is quiet for once, but you know better than to trust it. Peace in your life usually means something worse is waiting just over the next hill. Eurystheus doesn't even pretend to welcome you back. He just waves a scroll at your face and mutters, "Golden apples from the garden of the Hesperides. Bring them." That's it. No instructions, no map, just a vague divine fruit quest. Probably sponsored by chaos and poor communication. The Garden of the Hesperides is supposed to be hidden far west again, maybe even beyond where Geryon fell. The apples are sacred, glowing, possibly grant immortality. Definitely guarded by 3 nymphs and a 100-headed dragon named Ladon, who never, ever naps. Historians still argue whether the garden was real, symbolic, or just a poetic metaphor for things people shouldn't touch. Some think it represented paradise. Others say it was a celestial orchard that moved with the stars. One thing's certain, no one who's found it has ever sent a postcard, so you begin walking. Again. Along the way, you do what any hero does when facing a mythological maze. You ask for help. You meet Nereus, the old sea god who shapeshifts like a nervous actor. He tries to escape by turning into a fish, then a bird, then something that might have been a chair. Eventually, you pin him down in his manatee form until he sighs and points west. You cross deserts that shimmer like hammered gold. Climb ridges where the wind moans in foreign languages. One morning, you pass Atlas, yes, that Atlas still holding up the sky like a stressed-out waiter carrying a tray that never empties. He sees you and grins. Warily, you explain your mission. He laughs so hard the stars wobble. Then, an offer. He'll get the apples for you, he knows where the garden is, but only if you hold up the sky for a bit. You glance up. There it is, a shimmering dome of cosmic pressure, humming and heavy. You shrug. Sure, what's another cosmic burden? You take the weight and instantly regret it. Your knees tremble, your back cracks. Every joint in your body sings the song of absolutely not. The heavens push like a divine headache pressing on your whole skeleton. But you hold. Atlas strolls off, probably whistling. Time slows. You start talking to the clouds just to stay sane. You name them. You judge them. One looks like a smug goat and you whisper threats to it. Finally, Atlas returns with 3 golden apples in a sack made from stardust and poor decisions. But then, surprise, he tries to ditch you. Says he'll deliver them himself. He's free now and got plans. Maybe a pottery class. Maybe revenge. You smile, nod. Pretend to adjust the sky just a little and ask if he'd hold it for just a second so you can pad your lion cloak. He falls for it. You dump the sky back on his shoulders, grab the apples, and walk off like someone who didn't almost become a planetary support beam. Fringe bedtime thought. Some myths say the golden apples were originally a wedding gift from Gaia to Hera, symbols of eternal life and divine favor. Others say the garden floated in the far west, guarded not just by a dragon but by time itself. One fringe theory claims the apples weren't literal at all, but metaphors for forbidden knowledge, or really dangerous citrus. You return to Tyrants with the apples glowing softly in a satchel. Eurystheus peeks at them from behind a door and promptly yells, "Return them to the gods." Immediately. Do not eat them. You don't, but you do think about it, because by now, you've tasted everything else. War, loss, sweat, and silence. What's one more bite? But still, you hand them back, because your story's not done. Not yet. At this point, Eurystheus has run out of logical ideas. He stares at his dwindling list of labors like a man realizing all the good punishments are taken. Then he clears his throat and announces your next task in the most casual voice possible. Go to the underworld and bring back Cerberus. You blink slowly. Cerberus, the 3-headed dog. He nods. Alive. Of course, because nothing says reasonable errand like strolling into Hades, asking the king of the dead for his pet, and dragging it back topside without getting turned into a whisper. No one explains how you're supposed to enter the underworld. But that's the recurring theme of your life. Divine homework. With no answer. Key? So, you head south, past fields where no crops grow, past towns that won't say your name. You reach the cave at Cape Tainaron, one of the legendary entrances to the land of the dead. It doesn't look like much, just a dark hole in the cliffside, with cold air hissing from within and a faint smell of wet stone and finality. You step in, and down, and down, and down. The world gets quieter, colder. You don't notice when the torch goes out, it just fades, like everything else. Soon you're walking by instinct, through shadow thick as wool. Eventually, there's light, but it doesn't warm. It just glows. Like moonlight soaked in grief, you stand at the banks of the river Styx. Charon waits, skeletal and still, his skiff bobbing in water that reflects nothing. You offer him a coin from beneath your bracer, a trick you learned from an old gravekeeper in Thebes. He nods and lets you aboard. The journey across is silent. The only sound is your heartbeat. loud in your ears, like it's trying to remind you you're not dead. Not yet. On the far shore, the underworld unfolds like a broken map. Shadows of the dead drift by, whispering names you almost recognize. A child stares at you with empty eyes. A king glares. You walk quickly. Eventually, you find Hades. He doesn't sit on a throne. He leans against it, as if bored of ruling silence. His gaze is heavy, not cruel, but tired. He listens as you explain. He doesn't laugh, just nods. Like this sort of thing happens more than it should. You can take him, he says, if you don't harm him. No chains, no tricks. You nod. Cerberus appears from the dark like a storm with paws, 3 heads, each snarling, one drooling, one growling, one weirdly curious. The fur is blacker than the shadows around it. Its eyes glow red. Its breath could melt iron. Each head watches you differently. One wants to eat you. One wants to test you. And the third seems convinced you're a chew toy. You kneel. You hold out your hand. No sudden moves. And slowly, miraculously, the dog approaches, sniffs, snorts, then licks your face with a tongue the size of your arm. You take that as a yes. The journey back is surreal. You walk through death itself with a giant hellhound trotting beside you like a monstrous lapdog. Ghosts scatter. Even Charon raises an eyebrow. Back in the world of the living, the sun feels like a betrayal too bright, too hot, too real. Cerberus whines. You gently guide him to Tyrants, where Eurystheus screams, leaps into his storage jar, and begs you to put it back. You do. With a quiet pat and a whispered thank you, you lead Cerberus back to Hades. The dog doesn't want to go. Not at first. He paws at you once, and that paw nearly breaks your ribs. You smile anyway. Fringe fact. Some ancient sources claim that Hades allowed heroes into the underworld from time to time, but only if they respected the rules. Hercules, they say, didn't sneak or steal, he asked, and that made all the difference. Historians still argue whether Cerberus represents death itself or the fear of death. Wild, untrainable, and impossible to live beside for long, but tonight, you led that fear by the collar and returned it without a scratch. You rest that night with dirt under your fingernails and the chill of the underworld still in your bones. But you sleep, because there's nothing left to fear. You return from the underworld thinking, that has to be it. 12 labors, 12 completed, 12 stories that no one will believe. But Eurystheus, bless his nervous little heart, clears his throat and says, actually, there are a few additional tasks. He calls them side quests. You call them divine procrastination. So off you go again. The first stop, a centaur commune. That's not what they call it, but that's definitely what it is. You arrive hoping for a quiet cup of wine and maybe a nap. Instead, you walk into the middle of a brawl between 2 centaur clans over who gets to keep a vintage amphora of Dionysian wine. You try diplomacy. Then you try shouting. Then you throw a bench. Somewhere in the chaos, you lose your tunic, knock over a sacred fig tree, and accidentally punch a statue of a minor river god. The statue punches back. You spend the next day explaining that your broken nose was the result of a cultural misunderstanding. By day 3, the wine is spilled, the fig tree is replanted, and the centaurs have composed a peace treaty that mostly involves promising not to steal each other's combs. You leave in silence. Next, you're asked to help Prometheus. Yes, that Prometheus, the one chained to a rock with a liver that regenerates just in time to be pecked out again each day by a very punctual eagle. It's been happening for centuries. You find him mid-scream. You throw a rock at the eagle, it squawks, flaps away, and gives you the kind of look only divine scavenger birds can give. Prometheus sacks in relief. You smash the chains. He groans something about gratitude and questionable gods, then collapses in the fetal position, humming what might be an ancient lullaby or a recipe for lentil stew. You sit beside him for a while. Neither of you speaks much. Later, you head to Troy because someone wants you to help defend a princess from being abducted. Again, you defeat 2 pirates, accidentally propose marriage by mispronouncing a greeting, and end up officiating a wedding instead. The bride cries. The groom faints. You steal a cake and leave before anyone remembers you're not actually invited. By now, your reputation precedes you. People greet you with caution, like someone who's either about to solve a problem or become one. Fringe tidbit. Some scholars believe these bonus labors were later additions to the myth. Local legends folded into Hercules' epic like bits of flavor into a loaf of mythological sourdough. Others argue they represent the spread of Heraclean cults across the Mediterranean, each region wanting its own heroic tale. One odd version of the Prometheus story claims that when you freed him, he whispered a prophecy into your ear. A truth so profound you forgot it immediately. Which, honestly, tracks. Back in Tyrans, Eurystheus has stopped keeping count. You think he's writing your obituary in advance just in case. You lie beneath a fig tree, tunic restored, arms crossed behind your head. The sun filters through the leaves like warm honey. Somewhere nearby, a bee buzzes lazily. You think about the people you've met, the fights that didn't need to happen, the ones that did, the wine spilled, the trees saved, the eagle, that really annoying eagle. You realize you're not angry anymore, just tired. But not the bad kind of tired. The kind that comes after doing something that mattered. Even if no one quite understands how or why, you close your eyes. And for the first time in what feels like years, no monsters, no screaming birds, no labors, just silence. And maybe the soft hum of peace. You wake to quiet. Not the kind that hints at ambushes or monsters crouching just out of sight, but the rare, honest kind. No birds, no shouting, just the breeze. But the peace doesn't last, because there's one story you never wanted to face. One memory you've buried beneath labors and lion pelts and long walks through lands that didn't ask for your footsteps. The madness. Before the labors, before the glory. There was that moment, the one they whisper about in half-finished verses and pause too long before retelling. You don't want to go back there. But you do, because to finish this journey, you have to. You were younger then, not weaker, just unguarded, married, a father, a man with a hearth and a voice that still knew how to laugh. And then came Hera, always Hera, tired of your name, tired of your breath, tired of your being, so she sent you a gift. Madness, not the kind with screaming or prophecy. No snakes in your hair, just a quiet rewiring. One morning, the world looked wrong. Your hands shook. Your children didn't sound like themselves. The walls whispered that they were enemies, that they weren't yours. You believed it. You remember shouting. You remember a blur, faces you loved turning to shadows, the weight of a club, the silence after, and then clarity. Too late. You stood alone in the wreckage of your home, covered in blood that didn't belong to monsters. It belonged to your sons, to your wife, to your own soul. That was the day the world shifted. That was the debt the labors were meant to pay. Historians still argue whether this part of the myth was added later to give your story depth. Some say it was a metaphor for the burden of war, the soldier returning home with broken senses. Others think it's the core of your humanity, that your strength was never the point. Your regret was, you think they're all wrong, because none of them remember what the air felt like when the silence settled. You fled. You threw yourself at every monster, every challenge, every impossible task not to win, but to atone. You wanted pain. You wanted penance. You wanted to be anything other than the man who stood in that home with blood on his feet and no voice left in his chest. And for years, it worked. You became the hero, the symbol, the statue. But now, sitting beneath the same sky, your labors nearly done, the memory returns not as punishment, but as part of you, not a wound, a scar. And scars don't vanish. They throb in the rain. They whisper in the dark. They remind you that even strength breaks. You take a breath. The same lungs that once roared now shake with quiet, and you whisper into the wind, I'm still here. Fringe thought for your night. In some versions of your story, it's said that after your madness, you didn't just begin the labors, you begged for them, pleaded with the oracle at Delphi for punishment. She told you to serve Eurystheus, your cousin, a man smaller in every way. It was humiliating, and exactly what you asked for. And now, here you are, not redeemed, not forgiven, but seen. You lie back on the hillside, stars drifting above like eyes too tired to judge you anymore. You don't cry, you just let the stillness settle, because you earned it. The sky is soft this morning, A quiet kind of blue, like someone whispered color into it instead of painting. The olive trees sway without urgency. Even the cicadas, usually so eager to shout about the heat, hum in a gentler rhythm. You rise slowly. Because this is the last one. Not a monster, not a swamp, not a scream waiting in the reeds. This is your ending. You're told the gods have decided it's time. That Olympus is ready. That your work here, in the dust and blood and laughter and guilt, has served its purpose. But it doesn't feel like victory. It feels like release. Your body aches in ways that have nothing to do with age and everything to do with carrying 12 lives worth of mistakes. And still, you move forward because that's what you've always done. But you feel it now. The weight of your story shifting. The pull of myth wrapping around your name like vines curling around marble. You're no longer just a man who walked through fire. You're the idea of that man. And that is heavier than any lion's pelt. They say Zeus calls you now, offers you a seat at Olympus. Immortality. Applause. The kind of afterlife where you're fed grapes by breezy nymphs and no one remembers the parts of your story that went dark. You hesitate, not because you don't want it, but because you know what it will erase. The cracks, the silence, the cold moments, the heartbreaks that made your strength real. You remember your wife Megara before the madness? You remember your son's laughter, their tiny hands gripping yours, the way they'd shout your name as if it meant invincible. You remember the centaurs, the deer, the birds that wouldn't shut up, the dog with 3 heads who licked your face like you were just another pup in the pack. You remember how it felt to walk through the world knowing every step might be your last and doing it anyway? And then you agree. Not because you're ready, but because your part here is done. Your body is burned on a pyre built high into the sky. Your mortal pieces offer to flame and wind. The pain vanishes. Your soul rises. And then you are no longer Hercules. You are Heracles, a god. Your back straightens. Your limbs lighten. The weight of grief unhooks from your ribs, floating off like mist in a sunrise. You walk into Olympus barefoot. The gods nod, some with respect, some with guilt, some with envy. You sit beside them, not as their equal, but as something rarer, a mortal who earned eternity not by birthright, but by endurance. One fringe note to drift on. In some versions, you never truly die. Instead, you split. Your mortal pain burned away while your divine self rises. A story with 2 endings, one for humans to mourn, one for gods to remember. Historians still argue which is real. Maybe both are, maybe neither, but somewhere, in a quiet field below Olympus, a lion cloak still hangs from a fig tree, waiting, just in case. And now your story fades. The labors are done. The road has quieted. The monsters have gone still in their caves. And even the gods so loud, so dramatic have turned to whispering. You lie down in a space that isn't quite Earth, but not yet sky. A space where time doesn't rush, and memory feels like warm water. Your muscles soften. The roar you once carried in your chest settles into something quieter, something steadier. Not fear, not guilt, just breath. In, out. The weight of your story lifts. You're not the man who wrestled rivers anymore. You're not the one who held up the sky. You are just here, whole. Despite the cracks, still, despite the storms, safe, despite the gods. And as the stars spread overhead like old friends laying down beside you, you feel it. The hush that comes at the end of every great tale. The quiet not of forgetting, but of rest. You close your eyes. Somewhere, a river flows gently through clean stables. Somewhere, an apple glows in a garden no map can find. And somewhere, a lion sleeps peacefully on a pelt that remembers you. Sleep now. You've earned it.